Very dramatic title, but ChatGPT told me it's a winner, so here we are. So, about a year and a half ago, I moved from Toronto, Canada, where I was born and raised, to San Francisco, California. And across from my new apartment was this massive billboard that read, "Move fast and break things." For anyone who might not know, this is a quote that was popularized by Mark Zuckerberg almost 2 decades ago, back when Facebook, which is now Meta, was just getting started. And stepping into Silicon Valley for the first time to start this new job, I thought, yeah, that's what I signed up for, to move fast and break things. But little did I know, my company's mantra would be as far from that quote as possible. My name is Sarika Goyal, and I'm a senior product designer at Ford Motor Company on the safety and security team. And at Ford, we do move fast. I mean, of course we do. We literally replaced horse-drawn carriages with the Model T, the first car for everyday people. But on our team, our mantra isn't move fast and break things. It's move fast and don't break anything. So let's watch a video.
We never lost an American in space. We're sure as hell not going to lose one on my watch. Failure is not an option.
Show of hands, who here remembers this iconic scene from Apollo 13 where the legendary NASA director Gene Kranz tells his team failure is not an option? Well, at Ford, we might not be designing rockets, at least not yet, but for our users, the stakes are just as high. Just like Apollo 13 at Ford, failure is not an option. The standard metrics that I used to design for, like conversion and engagement and click through rates, those no longer take priority. On my safety and security team, we're dealing with high stakes scenarios like vehicle theft and high severity collisions, where the only design that matters is design that works. For most products, if it works 85% of the time, it's ready to go to market. At Ford, 85% isn't good enough. In fact, good enough doesn't exist. If our product fails even a single customer, we might have to pull it off the market entirely. I'm not kidding, and I'll tell you about that story in just a moment. But for us, a bug is not just a minor inconvenience. It can shatter trust, it can strand a driver, and in the worst case scenario, it can cost a life. That is what I'm here to share with you today. The hard-won lessons from designing products where failure has real human consequences. And these lessons fundamentally shifted my mindset to obsess over the worst case scenario, which, as you'll learn today, it's not just for automotive designers like me, it's for anyone designing for humans. And so, to understand failure, we first need to define what success looks like, or what we designers like to call the happy path. So let me walk you through what the happy path looks like for Ford's target customer. So you hop in your car and you push that start button, or you put your key in the ignition and your vehicle starts up. Your dashboard glows to life, things are moving. And then your map appears, and traffic in Bangalore, for once, isn't looking too bad today. Things are looking good. You merge onto the highway, and the person behind you backs up to let you in. They don't tailgate, they don't speed up, they create room. And then you arrive and you find a parking spot right out front, and there's a charging station so you can plug in your brand new EV. And you hop out of your car and you lock the car, and there's that crisp electronic beep that is designed auditory confirmation that your journey is now successfully over. That is our happy path. The car connects, traffic flows, parking is easy. It's a system working in harmony with your life. It's calm, it's reliable, it's predictable, it's also a lie. Because that calm, confident driver that we designed for, um, that's sorry, that's not the right slide. Uh, sorry. Um, sorry, AV, I don't know what's going on. Clickers are, oh, oh my God. Kill it? Okay. Whoa. Welcome to the real presentation. Thank you. All right. Didn't know we have to act for this too. What you just felt, that rush of adrenaline, that loss of control, that desperate need for someone to just fix it, that is what I'm here to talk about today. The unhappiest path. And that crisis, that didn't happen on a highway at 100 kilometers per hour. That happened here in this air conditioned room with a slide deck. But that feeling in our chest, that is the exact same physiological response your user experiences when their payment fails or their file doesn't load or they can't undo a critical action. Hold on to that feeling as I walk us through exactly what we just experienced, because understanding crisis psychology changes everything about how we design. So, the first condition that we experienced was cognitive tunneling. Our world shrank. We were looking at the glitching slides and we weren't thinking about what's for dinner or what's the next talk or when the tea break is going to happen. We were laser focused on one single thing, which is when will the chaos stop? Think about your user looking at the same interface, right? They're not going to notice your carefully crafted navigation or that micro animation you spent months prototyping. All they care about is how to fix it. And so in a crisis, all that great design that unfortunately ceases to exist. The second condition we experienced was time distortion. How long did that crash feel like? 15 seconds, maybe 30? Is actually only 8 or 9 seconds. In a crisis, those seconds will stretch into minutes. Think about the last time that you hit send on an important email to an important person. And then as soon as you hit send, you notice a typo. And so you frantically hit undo send, and that half second where it's still processing, that doesn't feel like half a second, right? We're stuck in that half second of digital purgatory. And then finally, we experienced regression to instinct. In a crisis, your user is not going to learn new patterns. They are going to revert to their deeply ingrained habits. When the slides were glitching, what was your instinct? You looked at me, you looked at the slides, you looked at AV, you looked for established points of control. And the consequences of going against that very instinct, they can be severe. Let's talk about Tesla. How could we not? Tesla designed an innovative gear shifter that killed the billionaire Angela Chow. She meant to put her Model X into drive, but instead she put it into reverse, backed into a pond, and drowned. And why did that happen? Because Tesla replaced the physical gear shifter, something that we've been using the exact same way for decades, with swipe gestures on a touchscreen. Swipe up to drive, swipe down to reverse. And yet, for 80 years, drivers have learned that you pull the gear shift down and back to move forward. That is our muscle memory, that is our instinct, right? Tesla's design team, they thought that they were doing something super clever and futuristic by moving that control into the cheaper touchscreen. But they ignored something fundamental, that in a moment of panic, your user is not going to adapt to new interaction patterns. they are going to revert to what their hands and what their brains remember from years and years of repetition. And so all of these psychological concepts, they are not abstract concepts. They're psychophysiological responses, your user's brain going into emergency mode. And that moment when your user's brain is in retreat, that is when our design is getting tested for real. And so, how do we design for those circumstances? What does that look like? Well, we could try trial and error, but that's too slow. It's too expensive when your failure has real consequences. And so, coming to Ford, I realized we needed a new system. We needed a way to approach this. And so I developed the crisis readiness equation. C plus H plus E times R plus T minus O plus S equals crisis readiness. I know. Math at a design conference? You have to be joking. Stay with me for a second, because this equation is going to break down into something that is genuinely useful. So think about it as these two fuel tanks powering your crisis response minus the frictions and the drag factors that are working against you. So our first tank is our preparation tank. This is how well we measure and understand and prepare for the crisis before it actually happens. The second is our execution tank. This is what our product does in that moment of crisis. And then the subtracted term represents our drag factors. These are the things that actively impede your crisis readiness. When both of the fuel tanks are full, crisis readiness skyrockets. When either or both are empty, your whole system fails. And in the meantime, those drag factors are really creeping in, impeding progress. So this whole framework, it comes together and it looks nice on a slide, but its true value is in its application. So let me walk you through a couple examples of how we came up with this using examples from the industry and from Ford. So let's start with the first variable in our preparation tank, which is C for context. Context asks where, when, and under what conditions is failure going to strike. And at Ford, that means we're really preparing for a really diverse user base. Over 90% of Americans aged 18 and older are licensed to drive. That means roughly 242 million users in America alone, from the newly licensed teenager to the senior citizen who's been driving for decades. And we can't test every possible use case across every possible user. And so we focus on the most vulnerable scenarios, the most high stakes ones. A perfect example of that is our post-collision support flow. So here's the obvious problem about learning about collisions. We can't put a test participant in a test vehicle, crash the car, and then ask, hey, how did you think and act and feel in that scenario? It doesn't work like that, right? And asking people to recall past collision experiences, that will provide incomplete, inaccurate information because trauma memories are notoriously unreliable. And so at Ford, we did the next best thing. We simulated a crash. We had smoke alarms and horns and all kinds of alerts. And we had one of my colleagues playing a 911 operator and one of them acting as a really angry driver. Everybody's acting skills were really sharpened that day. And what we realized was that test participants, even though they were safe, they were still frantic and overwhelmed, similar to how they would be in a real collision. And that gave us much richer insights than we would have gotten if we had just interviewed them about their past collision experiences. And so the best part of all of this was that we actually brought our PMs in to facilitate the testing. And that's because of Gemba. Gemba is a Japanese concept that means the real place or the actual place. It says that great work is not going to happen from 30,000 feet in the air looking down from a desk. It happens on the floor, seeing the experience through your customer's eyes. When your PM watches a customer struggle with real-time chaos, those insights hit so much differently than a nicely synthesized research report. And so that is what context is all about understanding the actual environment where failure is going to strike and not imagining it from afar. That brings us to our second variable of H for human capacity, which asks, who is your most vulnerable user in their worst moment? So let's consider vehicle theft. It's a very real fear for a lot of drivers, a lot of us here today, right? You've probably seen the manual countermeasures against vehicle theft. We have steering wheel locks that take a couple minutes to install and then remove. And then personally, I've seen handwritten notes in my neighborhood where people will just write empty on a piece of paper, hoping that the thief will see that and maybe move on to the next car. These solutions, they could work, but they're cumbersome, they're error prone, they're frankly just a huge hassle. And so at Ford, we realized we needed something better, and we developed Start Inhibit. This is Ford's vehicle theft prevention feature. What it does is that even if somebody steals your keys or breaks into your car, they still cannot drive your car away. You can activate Start Inhibit in your app, and what it will do is block the car from moving. It's simple and sounds pretty cool, right? Well, we launched it last year after nearly a decade of development, and we still could not have predicted the extreme customer calls that would come into our call center. Let me talk you through a few of them. Customer A, he activates Start Inhibit, and then when he's ready to drive, he's using that slider to try to deactivate it in the app, and he tries 69 times. I'm not kidding, 69 times, and it will not deactivate. What happened was that he was in a no network zone, but we didn't have the error messaging to tell him that. Then there was customer B. He was playing around in the Ford app, exploring new features, and he activated Start Inhibit by accident. And then, because he hadn't done it intentionally, he thought that Ford had played God and blocked his vehicle from moving. And so he calls our call center and he's really angry, and he actually threatened to switch to Toyota. And then we have customer C. This is my favorite. Customer C, let's call him Praveen. So Praveen is a 72-year-old man. He's very sweet. And he activates Start Inhibit for vehicle security just like he's supposed to. He does the right thing. But then later, when he wants to deactivate Start Inhibit, he goes to his smartphone, and Praveen can't find the Ford app on his phone. Happens. And so, without any other option, Praveen has to have his vehicle towed to the dealer. It literally won't move. What else can he do? And then when he gets to the dealer calls us and tells us that in all this chaos, Praveen has at this point lost his phone entirely. So at that time, the phone was the only way to deactivate Start Inhibit. And those calls that we got from these types of customers, they really hit us like a truck. But they also taught us about limitations on human capacity so that we could begin to design for them. And so normally we make features quiet and invisible, but this time we're making Start Inhibit loud. We are adding onboarding tutorials. We are adding a card pinned to the home screen of the app so that you know without a doubt that Start Inhibit is currently active. And we're adding clear error resolution pathways. We are designing for the stressed, confused, technologically challenged users rather than our happy path personas. That is human capacity. The final variable in our preparation tank is E for edge cases. It asks what a series or chain of events deserves investment today, even though it's unlikely. And for us, that is where we tackle scenarios like forgotten baby syndrome. This is the tragic phenomenon where a parent forgets their child in the back seat of their parked car on a hot day or a really cold day. And it's not because of negligence. It can happen to any responsible parent when they're distracted or stressed or their routine is disrupted, which frankly happens all the time. But given the severity of the consequences here, we realize that we need to solve for it. It's unlikely to happen, but we need a solution. And so we built rear seat occupant alerts. These alerts are obnoxiously loud, and that is by design. While we typically strive for polite, convenient notifications, RSOA does the exact opposite. Our flow is simple. If the driver opened their rear door upon ingress into the vehicle, we arm the system. We imagine that they may have placed a child in the back seat. Then, when they arrive at their destination, we use the dashboard to remind them to check the back seat for children or other passengers. If 30 seconds pass and the rear door still hasn't opened, we get louder. We start to sound off exterior alarms so that even if the parent has started walking away, we can still inform them that, hey, you should come back and check on the car. And our next iteration is getting even smarter with mobile notifications and automatic cabin conditioning to protect the potential child left behind in the vehicle. This multi-system, redundant system, it would be way too annoying and way too persistent in the average use case, but is critical to avoid extreme harm in the extreme edge case. So that is our preparation tank. Our second tank is our execution tank, how we deal with crises when they inevitably do happen. So let's start with the first variable, R, for robustness. Robustness asks, what still works when parts die or when the user is distressed? Remember Praveen, our 72-year-old customer who lost his phone, then towed his car, then just couldn't get start inhibit deactivated? Well, that specific use case forced us to build true robustness into the start inhibit feature. So we developed our first failsafe, which is a 6-digit passcode that we assign to every single customer when they first subscribe to the feature. So now, even if a customer loses their phone or it's broken or they can't find the Ford app, they can punch this memorized passcode into their vehicle to deactivate start inhibit, which removes the phone as that single point of failure. But recognizing that somebody like Praveen might also forget this passcode, we developed a backup to our backup, which is 2-factor authentication. So if an inhibited driver calls our call center for support and provides the correct 2FA information, we can remotely deactivate start inhibit for them. These were not theoretical nice-to-haves. These were born directly from those customers' crisis situations. And since implementing these robust fail-safes, our number of calls related to start inhibit deactivation issues have dropped, while our number of subscriptions to the Ford security package, which contains start inhibit, have been skyrocketing, increasing our revenue significantly. So I'm sure you're all wondering what start inhibit looks like in action. So I have a quick sizzle reel for you.
Alert, monitor, and protect what matters, all with the Ford Pass app. Customize theft alerts so you know what's happening with your truck when it's happening. Activate Start Inhibit so nobody can start your truck but you, even if they have an authorized key. Get direct access to a Ford rep with stolen vehicle services. If your truck is stolen, Ford will work directly with law enforcement to track and try to recover it. And if your truck can't be returned, Ford helps with that too, with deductible reimbursement, covering your deductible for up to $2,500 on a theft loss or damage claim. 1 million vehicles are stolen every year in the US. Don't let yours be next. Secure your Ford with the Ford Security Package, included for a year on the 2024 F-150, 2025 F-150, and 2025 Super Duty. Activate now in the Ford Pass app.
Thank you. All telemarketing, you guys appreciated that. The video really gets me excited. So that was robustness, right? Our final variable in our execution tank is trust. So you've developed those fail safes, but trust asks what proof is going to convince your users to give up control and rely on those backups that you've created. Let's go back to collisions. After collisions, originally, we used to pitch services like repairs, tows, and rentals. And engagement in those services was next to nothing. Well, what was happening was that after a collision, customers weren't looking to us for a sales pitch. They had their insurance for that. Ford had a really unique advantage that we hadn't tapped into, and that was the fact that we are the first to know when our customers have been in a collision. And that gives us a really unique opportunity to proactively support the customer. And so we pivoted from transaction to empathetic reassurance. We started sending messaging, letting them know that, hey, we know you've been in a collision and we're here and ready to support if you need us. And we're offering step-by-step safety instructions in-app and in-vehicle so that we can support our customer in that really scary moment after a crash. And our customers told us that they were pleasantly surprised that we had showed up for them in a moment of vulnerability without selling anything. So much so that even if their car was totaled in the crash, this support significantly increased their likelihood of purchasing a Ford. And that is what trust is. Being there for your customer when they need you the most without expecting transactional returns, recognizing that not longest, it's a feature that we designed that will automatically call emergency services if you're ever in a really high severity collision. Sounds life-saving, right? Well, we initially had the feature toggled off by default. It was a requirement. And what happened was that users rushing past this modal completely bypassed that toggle, leaving our 911 assist enablement rates really low. And so my team, we get together at work and we're sitting there and we're like, this is a life-saving feature. Why don't we just auto-opt users in and enable it for them? I mean, that's what Tesla does. Spoiler alert, as we learned earlier, don't always do what Tesla does. And so we had to find a middle ground. And we did. What we did was very simple. We just replaced that easily skippable toggle with clear yes and no buttons on screen, forcing an intentional decision. We also used a subtle dark pattern to make yes, the enablement option, the most attractive button on screen. And what happened is not only did opt-ins increase by about 45%, but also a bunch of those users didn't even realize that they'd opted into the feature because of how fast they were moving. They just clicked their big green button. But once they found out what they had clicked, they were grateful that we had guided them towards protection. Which brings us to our next variable, sorry, which is S, for shiny object noise. This represents the features that look great in demos, but they distract us from building true lifelines. Let's watch one more video, which is an example from IDEO's Future of Automobility project. Awesome. So just like anything to come out of IDEO, it was a beautiful video. And IDEO created this stunning vision of what self-driving cars might look like in 2027. And a lot of people called it the most compelling look at a self-driving future. And what it had was these swiveling seats, these immersive headpieces, a totally reimagined interior. And it looks beautiful. But all of us here today were critical thinkers, so let's look past some of that demo appeal. Those Swiveling seats, they can't be bolted down at all four corners like traditional seats, which compromises structural integrity in a collision. Not to mention those immersive headpieces. If you're in a collision, the first place your head is going is right against that headpiece, especially if you're not wearing a seatbelt, which nowhere to be seen. For 50 years, seatbelts have been mandatory because they're proven to save lives, but they weren't sexy enough for this concept car. And so that is textbook shiny object syndrome. We design things that look cool in presentations and generate buzz and win design awards, but often forget fundamental safety principles that we've spent decades learning, often through tragedy, like Angela Chow. And at Ford, we have to constantly resist that temptation to build the cool new thing just because it looks nice. We have to ask ourselves, does this feature make our customers safer or our concept cars sexier? So that's a constant problem we deal with. Now, having gone through the full equation, I'm sure a lot of you are thinking to yourself, all of this feels really specific to Ford. I want to make one thing absolutely clear. Crisis readiness is not just for Ford. It's not just for automotive designers. It's not just for people designing for life and death scenarios. It's for any product that can be used in a high stakes moment, which is every product. And I personally realized that when I was reflecting back on a few of the past lives that I've held. So back in 2019, I was working for the American department store Macy's. And at that time, it felt pretty low stakes, right? It's just easy retail therapy, buying some jeans, buying a t-shirt. But what if someone suddenly gets laid off and now they no longer have the finances to afford an online order that they'd placed? What does cancellation look like? Well, at Macy's, unfortunately, our system had terrible human capacity scores. We hadn't designed for someone burdened with significant financial trauma. And that person wouldn't have the mental bandwidth to navigate our complex cancellation flows or to decipher our really weird legal jargon. And then we also had poor robustness scores. Canceling an order was a really lengthy process with long phone calls and long wait times and no immediate confirmation of your financial return. And so when both preparation and execution are poor, crisis readiness collapses. For someone who's already grappling with a job loss, our system has failed them in the moment when they needed us the most. Now, in contrast, in 2023, I joined Getty Images as a senior product designer. And there, I was working on ensuring that businesses could confidently use our vast library of media assets. And here, the potential crisis that we had to think about was a small business owner who purchases the license for a media asset and then receives a threatening copyright infringement letter, even though they thought their purchase was legitimate. And it happens all the time. And we thought about that and we designed for high context scores. So we deeply understood the panic of non-legal users whose livelihoods depended on their assets being used without a hitch. And then we also created high trust signals, easily accessible licensing proof, clear legal protection information, dedicated rapid response channels. We had designed high preparation and execution, amplifying crisis readiness, creating a potentially devastating legal crisis, transforming a potentially devastating legal crisis into a manageable situation because our product met customers where they needed us. The final life that I lived was that of an engineer. I graduated from systems engineering back in Canada, and every Canadian engineer, when they graduate, receives this iron ring. We wear it on the pinky finger of our working hand, and the story behind why we wear it matters. So back in 1907, the Quebec Bridge collapsed due to flawed design and engineering arrogance. 75 people died. The iron ring was created from the material of that very bridge to serve as a physical reminder of our duty as engineers to public safety. So now you wear it on your dominant hand so that every time you sign something or type something or make a design, you're reminded that of the weight of your decisions. And when I transitioned from being an engineer to becoming a designer, I thought maybe I'm leaving some of that weight behind. But working at Ford taught me something crucial. And that is the fact that as designers, we do carry that same weight, that same responsibility. We just call it something else. So as engineers, our oath is first, do no harm to the public. As designers, we say, design like someone's worst day depends on it. Now, here is your final diagnostic tool. Take any critical flow in your product and run it through the crisis readiness equation. Fill your preparation tank. Do you understand the context of failure? Have you designed for edge cases? Then fill your execution tank. When the primary path fails, is there a backup? Is there a backup to the backup? And would your user trust that backup? And then finally, design for drag. What constraints and shiny distractions are getting in our way? Remember that the first two sums are multiplicative because if either tank is empty, the whole system goes down to 0. But if they're full, it skyrockets. And so that is the weight of design. We determine whether our users will navigate their crisis with chaos or clarity. And that's not a burden. That is the most important work we can do. Our founder, Henry Ford, once said, "Quality means doing it right when nobody is looking." For all of us here today, that means designing every interaction, every trust signal, every failsafe with the same rigor that we apply to life-critical systems, even if the immediate stakes might seem lower. Because whether you're designing a button or a bridge, everything matters. Today's framework isn't just about designing better products. It's about recognizing that in our increasingly hyper-connected world, design has become infrastructure. It's critical infrastructure that people are relying on in their worst moments. And right there, right at the edge of the human experience, that is when design is not neutral. It's either in the way or it's lighting the way. It's chaos or it's clarity. It's dead weight or a lifeline. So let's build lifelines. Thank you.